Find 2 and 1/10 times 10 to the negative fourth plus 9 and 74 hundredths times 10 to the negative fourth. Write your answer in scientific notation. First, let's start by rewriting the expression. We have 2 and 1/10 times 10 to the negative fourth plus 9 and 74 hundredths times 10 to the negative fourth. Notice that the two numbers have the same power of 10, 10 to the negative fourth. Remember, to add numbers written in scientific notation with the same power of 10, we want to add the factors. To do this, we need to use the distributive property to rewrite the expression. We are pulling out the common factor of 10 to the negative fourth. So we have 2 and 1/10 plus 9 and 74 hundredths times 10 to the negative fourth. Now we can add. 2 and 1/10 plus 9 and 74 hundredths is 11 and 84 hundredths. And we still multiply by 10 to the negative fourth. This number is not in scientific notation because the factor is greater than 10, so we need to write 11 and 84 hundredths in scientific notation. We need to move the decimal point one place to the left, so we have 1 and 184 thousandths times 10 to the first. This is still multiplied by 10 to the negative fourth. Now we need to use the product of powers property to simplify. This property says that to multiply two powers with the same base, in this case 10, we need to add their exponents. So we have the factor 1 and 184 thousandths times the base 10, and add the exponents. 1 plus negative 4 is negative 3. So, the sum of 2 and 1/10 times 10 to the negative fourth and 9 and 74 hundredths times 10 to the negative fourth is 1 and 184 thousandths times 10 to the negative third.
Find the quantity 2 times 10 to the negative fourth times the quantity 6 times 10 to the negative third. Write your answer in scientific notation. First, let's write the problem. The quantity 2 times 10 to the negative fourth times the quantity 6 times 10 to the negative third. We can use the commutative property of multiplication to write the whole number factors first and then the powers of 10. So we have 2 times 6 times 10 to the negative fourth times 10 to the negative third. Now, use the associative property of multiplication to group the whole number factors and the powers of 10. So group 2 times 6 and group 10 to the negative fourth times 10 to the negative third. Now we can evaluate the groupings. 2 times 6 is 12. For the powers of 10, we can use the product of powers property, which states that to multiply powers with the same base, add their exponents. -4 plus -3 is -7, so 10 to the -4th times 10 to the -3rd is 10 to the -7th. Remember that a number is written in scientific notation when it is represented as the product of a factor and a power of 10. The factor must be at least 1 and less than 10. In this case, our factor is 12, which is greater than 10, so we have not yet written the product in scientific notation. We need to write 12 in scientific notation. Let's review how to write a number in scientific notation. First, you move the decimal point to the right of the first non-zero digit. Then, you count the number of places you moved the decimal point. This determines the exponent of the power of 10. For a number greater than or equal to 10, you use a positive exponent when you move the decimal point to the left. For a number between 0 and 1, you use a negative exponent when you move the decimal point to the right. So, we need to move the decimal point to the right of the first non-zero digit, which in this case is the 1 in the tens place. Count the number of places the decimal point will move. 1. The decimal point will move 1 place. Because the number is greater than 10, we use a positive exponent. So we can write 12 as 1 and 2/10 times 10 to the first. And then this is still multiplied by 10 to the -7th. We can use the product of powers property again to simplify the powers of 10. So first we write 1 and 2/10. 1 plus -7 is -6, so 10 to the first times 10 to the -7th is 10 to the -6th. This number is now in scientific notation, so the quantity 2 times 10 to the -4th times the quantity 6 times 10 to the -3rd is equal to 1 and 2/10 times 10 to the -6th.
Find 5 3/10 times 10 to the 8th divided by 4 times 10 to the -3rd. Write your answer in scientific notation. First, let's start by rewriting the problem. We have 5 3/10 times 10 to the 8th divided by 4 times 10 to the -3rd. Remember, to divide numbers written in scientific notation, divide the factors and powers of 10 separately. To do this, we first need to rewrite the problem as a product of factors. We have 5 3/10 divided by 4 times 10 to the 8th divided by 10 to the -3rd. Now we can start dividing. First divide 5 3/10 by 4. We get 1 325 thousandths. This is still multiplied by 10 to the 8th divided by 10 to the -3rd. Keep the factor 1 and 325 thousandths. Now we need to use the quotient of powers property to simplify. This property says that to divide two powers with the same base, 10, subtract their exponents. So we keep the base, 10, and subtract the exponents. 8 minus negative 3 is 11. This answer is in scientific notation, so we do not need to perform any more steps. This means that 5 and 3/10 times 10 to the 8th divided by 4 times 10 to the negative 3rd is 1 and 325 thousandths times 10 to the 11th. 10 to the The diameter of the moon is about 3 and 48 times 10 to the 3rd kilometers. The diameter of the sun is about 1 and 4/10 times 10 to the 6th kilometers. How many times greater is the diameter of the sun than the diameter of the moon? To answer this question, we need to divide the diameter of the sun, about 1 and 4/10 times 10 to the 6th kilometers, by the diameter of the moon, about 3 and 48 times 10 to the 3rd kilometers. So let's write this out. We have 1 and 4/10 times 10 to the 6th divided by 3 and 48 times 10 to the 3rd. Remember, to divide numbers written in scientific notation, divide the factors and powers of 10 separately. To do this, we need to rewrite the problem as a product of factors. So we have 1 and 4/10 divided by 3 and 48 times 10 to the 6th divided by 10 to the 3rd. Now let's divide 1 and 4/10 by 3 and 48. This is about 402 thousandths. This is still multiplied by 10 to the 6th divided by 10 to the 3rd. Now we need to use the quotient of powers property to simplify. This property says that to divide powers with the same base, you need to subtract the exponents. So we keep the first factor, 402 thousandths, keep the base, 10, and then subtract the exponents. 6 minus 3 is 3. Because we are finding the number of times greater the diameter of the sun is than the diameter of the moon, let's write the answer in standard form, so that the comparison is more meaningful. Because the exponent on the power of 10 is 3, we want to move the decimal point 3 places to the right. So we have 402. Now let's answer the question. The diameter of the sun is about 402 times greater than the diameter of the moon.